Hi everybody, I wanted to make a quick video to show you some of the basics of the life cycle, if you will, of a group presentation so that you can navigate through this a little bit more easily and know a little bit about what we have and expectations. So I'm using sort of as a launching pad the 428 Neuroscience BMS Blackboard site. And so what you're going to do is that you're going to want to go under and find papers that people have posted. So for example, when we have the presentations of groups 1.1 and 2.1 come up, they'll actually have listed and posted their papers under their groups. And so you can go to that group and then download the information that they have and that they posted. And they will have posted their paper and also a PowerPoint presentation. So how do you get to that? Well, under My Groups, you'll have a full list of the groups there, including this one that has 3.1. And so you can just click on that, and then what it'll do is you can just go to Group File Exchange, and then under there, they'll have a couple of files that are listed under there that you can download. So just as a sort of an example of what they did back in the day. If we look at what they have in 3.1 here, this is from 2 years ago, but they have basically their article here and then a PowerPoint here. And so that's what you can go to actually download these. So as people who are presenting, you're going to want to get your article up as soon as you get it approved by me, and I'll let you guys know when that is, but I think it's the 23rd for most people, except for groups 1.1 and 2.1. And then the day before your presentation, by 5 p.m., I'm asking that you actually have this up on your and posted here. If you don't get it up there by 5 p.m., then there is a small late fee, or there's a small cost and points for it being late. And that's because we want people to be able to download your PowerPoint and know and be prepared for the class in the morning so that they know and can go through it with you and really participate in the discussions. So let's take a look at this 3.1 group that was back in 428 and see what they actually presented. So their article was on altered synapses and glial transmission in Alzheimer's disease using this Alzheimer's model mouse. And so this was out of the neurochemistry section, and they thought that their focus on GABA and the GABA transporter was a really interesting one to be able to use, and we thought so too. So we basically said go ahead and present it. So they went through and and you can get an idea of what the paper is like. This is posted under Blackboard as under the presentation, so you have an idea and a flavor of what the paper was like. So it's not horribly dense, but it is a full-on paper, and that's great. You can choose ones that are more slender than this if you'd like. The idea isn't that you actually present all of the different figures, but just the key ones. And so you can see how they address that in what they actually presented. So let's go to their PDF that they made from it. So the slides that they actually presented are here. So Stephanie and Kyle introduced themselves. They talked about Alzheimer's disease, gave some of the background that they had learned either from reading on their own or from the introduction that they had in the paper itself, and tried to make it really focused on like how do you provide the context for the presentation. And so they talked about this different types of classifications that they use, the SIRAD criteria and BRAC staging to try to help talk about these different types of things. So this wasn't in the paper, but it was part of, but these are things that were referenced to in the introduction. So they wanted to try to incorporate them as much as they could, and they included the right kinds of citations as well if they used an image that wasn't in the paper. And then they focus on what some of the big question of what causes a cognitive decline in Alzheimer's disease, and help to kind of frame it in terms of synapse loss. And so if you're at a loss in how this actually works for your paper, the introduction of a good paper will actually show how this is done. So they'll actually kind of walk through and will tell you, well, this is why the results that we have here are important. So when you're choosing your paper, think about that and see if they're giving a good context for what they're actually presenting. And then they also introduced some of the things that were being measured in this particular type of study. So vGlut1, vGAT, and GAD are several different types of transporters that were being used to measure the presynaptic terminal density and size. So they did that kind of thing. And then they focused on this question of the vulnerability of the GABAergic system and its relationship to Alzheimer's pathology. And here are some of the data that they went through. And so they broke this up amongst the two of them and went through there and focused on a couple of key points out of this. So even this, they wouldn't be able to go through every single one of these different graphs. They may be able to say, okay, this is a general trend, and then look, this goes down here and here. And so the rationale is basically that there's a loss of this vGlut1 density that you see in these different types of scenarios, including this one here. So, and then they would continue on. They might focus, as they did in this one here, on one particular aspect of the figure and be able to say, like, look, this one's really kind of interesting and weird, or useful in terms of what the paper is actually presenting, and then go into that. So the number of diagrams that are here is pretty dense. You'd be giving some highlights and then trying to strike into some of the main points of these different figures. But you can see how they tried to sort of focus people's attention on some of the key points that they have out of it. And then they go to the conclusions here, talking about the GABAergic synapses and the plaques. So, and the major point that they find here in terms of what their primary conclusions were, and then some of the issues that came up. So that's what they were looking at, and how they, and what they presented. So that gives you a flavor of the way that one group has solved this type of problem. The other thing then is to think about, well, what type of feedback is given. So in the class, you would talk to them and give some, and ask some questions as they're moving along. You would have read the paper, at least looked it over in some detail, so that you're able to participate in class. That's part of a preferred way of participating in the class and adding a lot to this type of this discussion. And these can get really interesting. So it really helps make the class worthwhile. So it's definitely recommended. The other thing is the feedback that we have, and so everybody's required to do that feedback. The way that works is that you go under where it has the discussion board and you click on that, and then there's a place for it under presentation reviews where you can find it. So for you guys then, what it looks like is that you are under here, and so for example, forum group 1.1, you can go and you can create a thread and add to it and start putting in your comments. And what these typically look like is, not like that, but here is that you'll have something that looks like this. This is not quite formatted exactly the way that it will look. But so people like Emily, for example, gave the feedback, I really enjoyed your presentation, good amount of time filling us in on the basics where your research stand. You didn't, so it was good. You gave the positive types of feedback first, and then I highlighted some a good critique, basically that they brought up, and that was basically, I think it would have been super helpful had there been a general diagram that on the whiteboard that connected each of the graphs' main results. And so what she's asking for is basically like, okay, you've got the PowerPoint presentation there, but you could use the whiteboard to help kind of keep track of what's going on in there, and so. And help the audience kind of have that big picture in mind. So that was something that that we'd done before in the previous round, and so she was recommending it there. Other ways to do it, but there was sort of a comment of basically wanting to have some way of kind of following along what was going on with this. And so there's more about this, more feedback that they had recommended, but it was really, they did a really good job, and they did. I remember it, and they did do a good job, and that feedback was really good. So that the next time that they actually presented, even though they were like the group members were switched, they both did a a significantly better job of actually doing that presentation. Okay, so while you're presenting your data, what will happen is that you'll have this, let me pull it up here. You'll be going through your PowerPoint slides and everything like that here, and I'll be asking questions. So I will assume the role of a critic, or at least a critical audience participant. And so I'll ask, well, like, why is this like this and then this didn't change? What's going on there? What do you think is going on there? So it's important that you're familiar with what you put up on there. I'm going to be focused mostly on what it is that you show, but it is, if you're missing a key part of the information that doesn't make sense and it's in the paper, I may draw and say, like, well, what about this other figure in like figure 6 that's, or 7 or whatever that's up there? Why is it that you know, they show this this point that doesn't seem to fit with what you're saying? You know, what's going on with that? So you need to know your paper and know how the pieces fit together, even though you're presenting a fraction of it to your group. Okay, so that is the a bit of that life cycle and the major points that I wanted to cover out of it. So I will, I guess as a reminder, you want to basically try to get up your files up onto Blackboard using this file exchange into groups, and get those up there as soon as you get the paper approved. And then your presentations you want up by 5 p.m. the day beforehand. All right, so I hope that helps, and I will talk to you soon.